Imagine a universe already torn by endless war. Now, what if a genius with an army of unstoppable robots suddenly appeared? Worlds would burn, heroes would fall, and the galaxy might never be the same. Can anyone survive Eggman's ultimate invasion? The warp shimmered and tore like paper as Dr. Eggman's latest invention, a vast interdimensional portal generator, hummed to life on the barren surface of an uncharted planet. Sparks of blue and violet lightning arced across the sky, illuminating jagged cliffs and the skeletal remains of what might have once been a thriving civilization. Then, with a sudden roar, the portal opened, jagged and unstable, spilling torrents of energy into the atmosphere. From its depths emerged the first of Eggman's robotic legions, marching with uncanny precision across the war-torn landscape. Towering, gleaming machines, their metal bodies reflecting the dying light of distant suns, moved with eerie synchronization, their servos and pistons pumping in rhythm. The ground trembled under the weight of Eggman's creations, and a low, mechanical hum, almost like a chant of inevitability, echoed through the valleys. The local wildlife, if any had survived the previous conflicts, had long since fled or cowered, leaving an empty, desolate stage for the invaders to make their mark. At the heart of this advancing column was Eggman himself, seated within his latest mobile command unit. His goggles glinted with malicious intellect, and his mustache twitched with satisfaction as he surveyed the landscape before him. Unlike his battles on Earth, these new surroundings presented no familiar cities or obstacles, only endless possibilities. The strange alien sky was tinged with green and gold clouds, swirling with the subtle currents of warp energy. And Eggman's sharp eyes caught every flicker of movement in the distance. He knew that in this world, every misstep could spell doom, but he thrived on the challenge. His mechanical army was designed for adaptability, each unit equipped with the latest in automated targeting, environmental scanning, and rapid response weaponry. They were ready. The first signs of resistance were subtle at first, a distant rumble of engines, the shimmer of energy shields flickering against the horizon. Eggman's scanners picked up readings unlike anything he had encountered on Mobius. Massive armored beings, clad in plates of ceramite and adorned with insignias of unknown origin, were advancing toward his forces. He tilted his head, intrigued rather than intimidated. These were no ordinary soldiers. The energy radiating from them was alien, raw, and chaotic, and yet it moved with an almost ritualistic discipline. Eggman's fingers danced across the controls of his command unit, activating communication protocols that sent pulses of data to his army. The robots responded instantly, shifting formations, deploying energy barriers, and charging their armaments with a precision that could only have been achieved through decades of his genius programming. As the gap between the two forces closed, the scale of the confrontation became astonishingly clear. Eggman's robots, designed for rapid deployment and high adaptability, were not mere soldiers. They were mobile factories of destruction. Armored walkers sprouted auxiliary weapons. Hovering drones whirred above the battlefield, scanning for weaknesses, and massive mechanized tanks rolled in precise lines, their cannons swiveling to track every movement of the approaching alien warriors. Eggman felt a thrill at the sight of his creations in action, each one a testament to his meticulous planning and boundless ambition. The mechanical chorus of gears, hydraulics, and energy discharges created a symphony of inevitability. Each step forward was calculated, each movement preordained, yet somehow still exhilarating in its unpredictability when faced with such a foreign opposition. Meanwhile, from the distant horizon, the alien forces began to respond. Bolts of energy and concussive rounds streaked across the sky, colliding with Eggman's robots in showers of sparks and metal shards. The robots adapted instantly, their armored surfaces shifting, energy fields flaring to absorb the impact, and retaliatory fire raining down with pinpoint accuracy. Eggman's mind raced, analyzing the patterns, predicting the counterattacks, and modifying his assault strategy in real time. Unlike the civilizations he had faced before, this world seemed alive with a war-born intelligence, and Eggman found himself exhilarated by the challenge. He had always thrived in chaos, turning complexity into opportunity, and now he had entered a universe where the very laws of battle were unfamiliar. Demanding his ingenuity, the terrain itself seemed to conspire with the conflict. Jagged rock formations, scorched plains, and crater valleys forced Eggman to constantly adjust his army's movements. Mobile bridges and deployable artillery platforms sprang into action from the robot's modular designs, overcoming obstacles that would have halted conventional forces. The first wave of alien counterattacks, while fierce, was met with preemptive maneuvers, traps, and rapid flanking strategies. Eggman's tactical mind worked like a well-oiled machine in perfect synchrony with his mechanical legions. Each decision was an extension of the robot's programming, each command a reflection of his meticulous foresight. And yet, there was an improvisational edge born of his genius that no code could replicate. As the first skirmish erupted, Eggman's units demonstrated their terrifying efficiency. Multi-legged walkers scuttled over jagged terrain, their claws and cannons dispatching any threat in their path. Hovering drones zipped through the air. The aliens, for all their discipline and sheer power, were unprepared for this brand of calculated, relentless technological assault. Eggman observed, analyzed, and adapted in real time, sending new orders, reconfiguring units, and testing the limits of his machines against a universe built for war. His eyes sparkled behind his goggles as he realized that this was not just a battle for survival. It was an opportunity to reshape an entirely new battlefield in his image. And so, with the first wave of his robotic army fully deployed and moving with inexorable precision, Dr. Eggman advanced deeper into the heart of this strange, violent world. Every step marking the beginning of a campaign that would test his intellect, his ambition, and the terrifying power of his creations against the formidable might of Warhammer 40K. Dr. Eggman had always prided himself on his technological genius, but as he observed the landscape of this new world, he realized that his robots' designs were more than just superior. They were revolutionary. The machines that had followed him through the unstable portal were not mere copies of earthly designs. They were the pinnacle of decades of innovation, each unit bristling with weaponry, defenses, and adaptive intelligence. The desert plains stretched out before him, punctuated by jagged spires of rock and the remnants of civilizations long lost to the ravages of time and war. Yet none of it seemed threatening to Eggman, because he knew that his creations could overcome anything. Every robot, from the small, agile scouts to the hulking mechanized walkers, had been programmed to assess and respond to threats instantly, learning from each encounter and improving in real time. Their sensors could detect thermal, chemical, and warp-based anomalies, mapping out the battlefield in ways that no organic mind could match. As Eggman's forces advanced, the first real test of their technological might became apparent. A contingent of alien warriors, clad in strange, segmented armor and wielding weapons that fired bolts of energy in arcs of unnatural light, emerged from behind a ridge. Their movements were coordinated, disciplined, and deadly. But Eggman's robots reacted almost before the enemy had finished their first volley. Defense shields flared into existence around his walkers, dispersing energy attacks in bright, blinding flashes. Tiny drones zipped through the air, intercepting projectiles mid-flight and recalibrating to the shifting battlefield, while heavy artillery units adjusted their trajectory to target weaknesses in the alien formations. Eggman's fingers flew across his control console, issuing directives, but even without his input, the robots adapted seamlessly, their AI working in concert with his strategies, as though anticipating his every thought. The technological superiority of Eggman's army did not stop at defense and adaptation. It extended into sheer firepower and efficiency. Multi-barreled cannons launched synchronized barrages, each shot calculating the exact trajectory to maximize damage while conserving energy. Smaller drones darted between enemy lines, planting explosive charges and sabotaging armored vehicles with precision strikes. Mobile command units emitted pulses that disrupted enemy communications, leaving their coordination in disarray. Eggman watched with gleeful anticipation as his machines turned the battlefield into a calculated chessboard, each movement and counter-movement meticulously executed. The alien forces, formidable as they were, seemed almost primitive in comparison to the relentless efficiency and versatility of his robots. One of the most striking demonstrations of Eggman's technological advantage came when his robots encountered natural terrain obstacles that would have stalled conventional forces. Jagged cliffs, deep ravines, and treacherous mudfields could have slowed any normal army to a crawl, but Eggman's creations were built to adapt. Walkers extended grappling arms to scale vertical surfaces, treaded vehicles converted into hovering units when necessary, and multi-legged robots scuttled over obstacles with uncanny agility. Each machine was a self-contained laboratory of innovation, capable of modifying its own functions on the fly. Eggman leaned back in his command unit, eyes gleaming, as he realized that in this world, his robots could do what no other army could. They could reshape the battlefield to suit their own strategy. The enemy responded with ferocity, launching concentrated attacks that lit the sky with bolts of destructive energy. Yet even in the face of overwhelming firepower, Eggman's army maintained cohesion and effectiveness. Energy shields flared to absorb the impact of plasma blasts. Reinforced armor plates shifted to distribute the force of explosions, and AI-driven countermeasures deployed in seconds to neutralize incoming threats. The battlefield became a dance of light and motion, metal against energy. Every clash demonstrating the gap between conventional warfare and the technological marvels Eggman had unleashed. Perhaps most impressive was the adaptability of his smaller units. Tiny scout robots, no larger than a foot in height, zipped between enemy lines, their optical sensors recording every movement, every pattern of attack. Their AI analyzed the data instantaneously, feeding it back to command units that recalibrated strategies in real time. Eggman's larger machines responded to these updates with precision, shifting formations, adjusting firing angles, and preemptively countering enemy maneuvers before they could be executed. It was a level of battlefield integration that no conventional army could hope to achieve, and Eggman reveled in the thought that his forces were operating as a single unstoppable entity, a mechanical mind stretching across miles of war-torn terrain. The energy signature of his robots alone became a form of psychological warfare. As they advanced, the hum of servos, the hiss of hydraulic systems, and the rhythmic pounding of heavy treads created an almost hypnotic presence on the battlefield. Enemy troops faltered at the sight of machines that seemed alive, more intelligent than any adversary they had faced. Eggman's genius was not only in building superior machines, but in understanding the impact of their presence. Each unit was designed to intimidate as much as to destroy, and the combined effect of thousands of robots moving with coordinated precision created an aura of inevitability. Even the aliens' most advanced weapons could not keep pace with Eggman's innovation. Experimental energy beams, psychic disruptors, and reinforced armor fell victim to targeted strikes and countermeasures. Eggman introduced variations mid-battle, deploying new configurations of robots, changing their loadouts, and sending specialized units to exploit previously unseen vulnerabilities. The ability to rapidly innovate on the battlefield, to outthink and outmaneuver an enemy in real time, was the ultimate demonstration of technological supremacy. Eggman's own command unit became a nerve center of relentless innovation. Holographic displays and real-time analysis allowed him to monitor every aspect of the engagement, while subroutines and automated systems implemented his strategies instantaneously across the battlefield. He felt a rush of exhilaration as his robots executed maneuvers he hadn't even fully anticipated, demonstrating the true genius of combining human ingenuity with advanced artificial intelligence. The alien forces, for all their might, seemed trapped in a dance of reaction and counter-reaction, never quite able to seize the initiative. As Eggman advanced further into the alien territory, it became evident that technological superiority was not just a matter of weapons or armor. It was the ability to control the pace of war itself. Every movement, every adjustment, every calculated strike reinforced the dominance of Eggman's army, and the enemy's capacity to resist seemed to shrink under the relentless onslaught of innovation. The robots, extensions of Eggman's mind, moved like a single organism, adapting, evolving, and striking with a precision that blurred the line between machine and strategy, proving that in this strange and hostile universe, technology could be the ultimate weapon, and Dr. Eggman had brought the pinnacle of it to bear. The first encounter with the Space Marines was unlike anything Dr. Eggman had ever faced. His sensors picked up immense energy signatures moving with disciplined precision across the distant horizon, and even the hum of his robotic army seemed to pause, as if recognizing the gravity of what was approaching. The Space Marines were enormous, clad in gleaming power armor that reflected the sickly green light of the alien sky, their bolters and energy weapons bristling with menace. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never known defeat, each step echoing with a weight that made the ground itself seem to recoil. Eggman tilted his head, studying the formations with a mix of curiosity and excitement. This was not merely an enemy to be destroyed. This was a challenge, a puzzle of tactics and strength that demanded ingenuity at every turn. As the first Space Marines came into view, Eggman activated his command unit, sending waves of instructions through the ranks of his robotic forces. Multi-legged walkers shifted into defensive formations, energy shields flickering into existence to absorb the first bursts of plasma fire. Small scout drones darted forward, mapping the terrain and scanning the Marines for weaknesses, feeding the data back into Eggman's calculations in real time. The Space Marines fired their bolters, and streams of explosive rounds streaked across the battlefield, detonating against armored surfaces with thunderous concussions. Eggman's robots responded instantaneously, adjusting their positioning, reorienting shields, and firing counter-energy blasts that intercepted incoming projectiles mid-flight. The clash was immediate, intense, and chaotic. Eggman felt a thrill unlike anything he had experienced in battles on Mobius. These Space Marines were not merely soldiers. They were the embodiment of relentless discipline, an apex of human, and possibly more than human, combat efficiency. Yet for all their training and strength, they were facing an opponent whose technology operated on an entirely different level. Eggman's robotic army was adaptive, intelligent, and unfeeling. Each unit could anticipate moves, respond faster than any organic mind, and coordinate with thousands of other machines as if sharing a single consciousness. Even the smallest scout drones executed maneuvers that would have required months of training for any human warrior. The first clash was brutal. A squad of Space Marines charged forward, power fists raised, and bolters firing in controlled bursts. Eggman's walkers pivoted, heavy treads grinding against the rocky terrain as automated countermeasures deployed in an intricate dance of attack and defense. Explosive charges detonated at calculated points, forcing the Marines to adjust their advance, while targeting drones lit up armor weak points that Eggman's artillery units exploited with precision. Sparks flew, metal screeched against ceramite, and the air vibrated with the energy of unleashed firepower. Despite the ferocity of the Space Marines, the robots' superior numbers, coordination, and adaptability allowed them to absorb the initial assault with minimal losses, reinforcing Eggman's confidence that his army could contend with even the galaxy. Yet Eggman was careful not to underestimate them. He observed their tactics, noting the way they moved in tight formations, how they coordinated fire, and the subtle signals exchanged through gestural commands and psychic enhancements that his sensors could barely decipher. Each observation fed into his calculations, and he adjusted his strategy accordingly. Some units were redeployed to outflank the Marines, while others created diversions, drawing them into zones where traps and automated turrets awaited. Eggman's genius lay not just in creating powerful machines, but in creating an environment in which their intelligence could exploit every tactical opportunity. The Space Marines responded with relentless tenacity. Heavy bolters roared, lances of concentrated energy cut through the air, and close combat specialists leapt from cover to engage Eggman's units in hand-to-hand combat where possible. Despite this, the robots adapted in real time. Articulated limbs blocked attacks. Shock absorbers dissipated kinetic energy from massive strikes, and integrated weapon systems retaliated instantly. Eggman's drones scouted above, relaying enemy positions, calculating angles of attack, and deploying micro-munitions that disoriented the Marines long enough for heavier units to strike. It was a deadly dance, a brutal exchange of fire, armor, and strategy, with Eggman orchestrating every move with a meticulous, almost artistic precision. The terrain itself became a character in the battle. Jagged cliffs and ruined structures provided both cover and obstacles. Eggman's robots modified their own configurations to navigate the environment efficiently. Hovering units cleared gaps that walkers could not. Grappling arms scaled vertical surfaces to gain vantage points, and deployable platforms provided stable firing positions on uneven ground. The Space Marines, trained for versatility, adapted quickly, leaping across craters, using energy shields to advance under fire, and coordinating their strikes to counter the mechanical onslaught. Eggman's excitement grew with every exchange. The unpredictability of the Space Marines pushed his machines to the limits of their programming and forced him to innovate in real time. A particularly tense moment occurred when a squad of Terminator-armored Space Marines descended from a hovering transport, landing in the midst of Eggman's advance. Their massive storm bolters fired in controlled sweeps, ripping through robots that had never encountered such concentrated firepower. Eggman's larger walkers retaliated, their massive cannons blasting in arcs that tore apart the ground around the Marines. But the Terminators pressed on, relentless and precise. Eggman quickly redirected specialized units, creating mobile barriers and sending swarms of smaller drones to harass and distract the heavily armored invaders. Each maneuver was calculated to exploit weaknesses in the Terminator's formation, to fragment their advance and to maintain the offensive pressure that kept his robots in control of the battlefield. As the clash escalated, Eggman realized that this encounter was more than a test of his army's power. It was a contest of intellect and adaptability. The Space Marines were formidable, yes, but they operated within the limits of organic decision-making, even enhanced by training and psychic augmentations. Eggman's machines, however, could learn, adapt, and react almost instantaneously, sharing battlefield data across the entire network. Every move the Marines made was countered, every advance anticipated, and every strategy met with a calculated response. Yet, the unpredictability and sheer courage of the Space Marines forced Eggman to constantly adjust, to innovate on the fly, and to push the capabilities of his robotic army beyond anything previously imagined. The battlefield became a cacophony of energy discharges, metal impacts, and the roar of mechanical engines. Each engagement revealed new aspects of the Space Marines' tactics, and Eggman responded with equal creativity, deploying ambushes, flanking units, and adaptive weapon systems to keep the Marines off balance. Small squads of robots infiltrated enemy lines, sabotaging equipment and forcing the Marines to divert attention, while massive walkers held the front line, absorbing fire and providing suppressive barrages. Eggman's mind worked like a conductor's, orchestrating every unit with precision, each action feeding into the next, creating a symphony of technological dominance that pushed the Space Marines to the edge of their legendary discipline. The first encounter had become a brutal, intricate ballet of firepower, strategy, and adaptability. Eggman watched from his command unit as his robots moved in unison, a seamless blend of intelligence and machine, testing the limits of the Space Marines' might. The clash was intense, exhausting, and exhilarating, a true testament to the power of his creations and the genius of his planning. In that moment, Dr. Eggman understood that facing the Space Marines was not merely a challenge of destruction, it was a challenge of wit. The moment Eggman's robots fully revealed themselves on the warped horizons of this new universe, the air seemed to ripple with an unnatural tension. The forces of chaos, long attuned to sensing anomalies in the warp, reacted instantly to the intrusion. Demonic presences flickered in and out of visibility, their forms shifting unpredictably, eyes glowing with malevolent curiosity. The Chaos Gods themselves, each invested in the endless machinations of the galaxy, sensed the arrival of this technological interloper with a mixture of intrigue and irritation. These were not mere mortals or renegade psychers. These were machines, constructs of pure logic and precision, yet driven by the unmistakable will of a single genius mind. Eggman's presence, and more important, Khorne, the blood god, felt the clash of metal and the smell of impending conflict as a tantalizing challenge. His demonic legions, normally drawn to the raw heat of mortal slaughter, sensed in Eggman's robots an unfamiliar sort of violence. They were devoid of fear, devoid of hesitation, and yet capable of destruction on a scale that rivaled his own warbands. The machine's relentless advance, their cold efficiency, and their capacity for adaptation intrigued him. There was a potential for carnage beyond even his own imagination, and though he would never ally with a mortal, the prospect of their destruction, or being destroyed, stirred his eternal thirst for bloodshed. Tzeentch, ever the manipulator, was fascinated by the implications of Eggman's intellect encoded into mechanical perfection. The chaos god of change, fate, and schemes saw in these robots an unpredictable element that could be folded into his web of intrigue. Their adaptive AI, capable of learning and improvising strategies in real time, mirrored aspects of his own shifting plans, and yet it operated independently of his influence. That was the truly exciting part. Here was a force that could rewrite its own destiny, an engine of innovation that challenged even the warp's mutable nature. Tzeentch's whispers reached Eggman in fleeting distortions, subtly nudging thoughts of unexpected possibilities, testing his ability to perceive threats and opportunities beyond the physical battlefield. Nurgle, the Plague Father, reacted differently. The mechanical army, sterile and resistant to decay, seemed almost antithetical to his domain. Yet there was a fascination in observing something so alien attempting to impose order where entropy reigned supreme. Eggman's robots, despite their cold precision, were vulnerable to corrosion, short circuits, and energy overloads. Nurgle saw opportunities to exploit these weaknesses, imagining subtle infestations of disease-like nanites that could compromise circuitry and spread slowly through their network. His daemons drifted in the psychic currents, curious and probing, trying to understand whether this was merely a fleeting incursion or the beginning of something far more profound. Slaanesh, the god of excess and sensation, was intrigued in a completely different way. The elegance of Eggman's designs, the flawless movements of his robots, and the symphony of destruction they orchestrated were forms of excess that appealed to the god's warped aesthetic. Each precise strike, each synchronized barrage, each mechanical flourish was a perverse kind of beauty. The clash of machinery against the brutal, chaotic battlefield created an energy that resonated with Slaanesh's hunger for sensation, tempting demonic agents to witness and even provoke the perfection inherent in Eggman's creations. There was pleasure in observing efficiency, in seeing it pushed to its extreme limits, and the god's influence seeped into the minds of mortals and demons alike, creating fleeting moments of awe and dread. The demonic legions themselves were the first to move, drawn by instinct, curiosity, and the faint pull of their master's attention. Lesser daemons flitted around the edges of Eggman's farces, probing with claws and tentacles, testing the limits of the machine's defenses. Automated sensors immediately registered these intrusions, deploying countermeasures with lightning speed. Energy beams, plasma bursts, and rapid response micromunitions tore through the warp-touched attackers. Yet the daemons persisted, shifting forms, dodging strikes, and learning in real time from every engagement. Eggman watched with a mixture of bemusement and fascination. These were enemies unlike any he had programmed simulations for. They were unpredictable, adaptive in ways that machines were not supposed to be. And yet he was confident that his technology could overcome even the chaotic ingenuity of the warp. The first true encounter occurred when a daemon horde surged toward a hive of Eggman's mechanized units. The ground trembled with their ethereal presence, and reality itself seemed to warp around them, colors bending unnaturally and shadows moving with impossible angles. Eggman's AI processed the anomaly, identifying threats based on patterns, movement speed, and energy output. Tactical commands were dispatched instantly. Walkers pivoted, shields deployed. Artillery units recalibrated, and smaller drones harried the edges of the horde, buying time for heavier units to engage. The daemons screamed in voices that were both alien and familiar, but the robots remained undaunted, moving with relentless precision, their movements a stark contrast to the chaotic, writhing forms before them. Eggman's fascination grew as he realized that this was more than just a physical confrontation. It was a contest of logic against chaos. Every demonic strike, every warp-infused attack forced his machines to adjust, to learn, and to anticipate in ways beyond their original programming. His AI began to incorporate elements of unpredictability into its calculations, evolving strategies in real time, responding not just to what was visible, but to what was possible. The clash became a dance of adaptation, metal against the immaterial, logic against the unpredictable, and every engagement revealed new facets of both the robots' capabilities and the nature of the forces they faced. The Chaos Gods themselves began to take notice of Eggman's ingenuity. Even Korn, who cared little for subtleties, recognized that these machines could wreak havoc in ways daemons alone could not. Tzeentch speculated, whispering to agents and mortal pawns whether this technology could be manipulated, subverted, or turned to his own ends. Nurgle imagined slow corrosion of circuits as a method of subtle corruption, while Slaanesh marveled at the perfection of motion and the aesthetic thrill of destruction executed with flawless efficiency. Eggman, of course, remained blissfully unaware of the cosmic attention he had drawn, focusing instead on the immediate challenge, adapting his machines to an environment where the rules of physics and reality were not entirely stable, and where the enemy could change form in ways no engineering manual could predict. The battlefield became a fusion of chaos and calculation. Demonic attacks rippled through the air, altering trajectories and bending light, while Eggman's robots responded with cold, mechanical certainty. Automated systems anticipated warp-based distortions. Predictive algorithms adjusted firing angles mid-flight, and self-repair units activated to mend any damage almost instantaneously. Even the smallest drones adapted, changing flight patterns to evade ethereal strikes and deliver precise countermeasures. Eggman's mind raced with excitement. Here, his genius was being tested not just against muscle or firepower, but against the very essence of unpredictability itself. And the results were exhilarating. Every engagement further demonstrated the gulf between instinctive chaos and calculated precision. Demonic creatures, powerful and terrifying, struggled to comprehend the relentless efficiency of Eggman's machines, and yet their unpredictable nature forced continual adaptation. The Chaos Gods watched with varying degrees of fascination and irritation, recognizing that Eggman's presence in their universe was neither accidental nor insignificant. His technological prowess was a force that could challenge the natural order of the warp itself, and his robotic army, though unaware of cosmic politics, moved through their domain with a combination of purpose, precision, and adaptability that both intrigued and unsettled the immortal powers observing from beyond the veil. Eggman's attention shifted toward the largest objective his scanners had detected, a sprawling hive world teetering on the edge of ruin. Its colossal spires and labyrinthine underhives stretching for miles in every direction. The sheer scale of the planet was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was a city grown over centuries, a tangled web of industry, habitation, and fortification, designed to sustain billions under layers of steel and concrete. His AI systems immediately began analyzing the environment, producing millions of potential assault vectors, calculating optimal routes for his mechanized army, and identifying zones where resistance might be concentrated. Eggman's excitement surged. This was no longer just a battlefield. It was an entire world to conquer, and his robotic forces were more than equipped to do so. As the first advance units crested the outer industrial rings, the hive world seemed to awaken. Automated defense emplacements, long dormant, powered to life with warning sirens shrieking across the air. Massive gun turrets swiveled with mechanical precision, releasing barrages of heavy shells and energy beams. Eggman's robots responded immediately. Energy shields flared, interceptors launched to neutralize incoming fire, and artillery units recalibrated their targeting to suppress defensive positions before they could inflict significant damage. The planet's defenders, likely members of the Imperium, emerged in staggered formations, armored and disciplined, their bolters and heavy weapons blazing. Eggman's AI evaluated each cluster, identifying the weakest points, the most vulnerable choke points, and the structures that, if destroyed, could collapse entire sectors of the hive. The first real engagement within the hive world's lower levels was a lesson in strategic warfare. Eggman deployed specialized units capable of navigating narrow corridors and vertical shafts. Tiny yet deadly automatons that could bypass bulkier defenses and sabotage vital systems. Explosive charges detonated deep within generator blocks, sending arcs of fire and sparks across the industrial complexes. Larger robots moved in formation along the main avenues, providing cover and suppressive fire for smaller units, while hovering drones provided reconnaissance from above, mapping enemy positions and relaying live tactical updates back to Eggman's command unit. The defenders tried to organize counterattacks, but the speed, coordination, and adaptability of Eggman's army kept them constantly off balance. unable to predict where the next strike would come from. Eggman's fascination grew as he observed how his robots interacted with the urban environment. They were not mere weapons, they were adaptable tools of conquest. Walkers extended grappling limbs to scale vertical walls. Deployable platforms allowed heavy artillery to fire from unexpected angles, and even the smallest units used debris and rubble as cover, utilizing their surroundings in ways human soldiers often overlooked. The hive world, with all its twisting streets, towering skyscrapers, and sprawling industrial zones, became both a battlefield and a proving ground, testing the limits of Eggman's designs in real time. Each tactical success reinforced the superiority of his technology, and each obstacle overcome provided new data, feeding into the evolving AI network that orchestrated the invasion. The defenders, meanwhile, were not idle. Elite squads of Space Marines and Imperial Guard units coordinated their strikes, targeting critical nodes, cutting off supply lines, and attempting to lure Eggman's units into ambushes. Bolters and las cannons roared through the corridors, tearing into walkers and scattering drone swarms. Yet Eggman's army adapted with alarming speed. Shield generators reconfigured to better absorb high-impact rounds. Units shifted positions to exploit the defenders' momentary openings, and tactical algorithms rerouted forces to maintain momentum while minimizing losses. The interplay between attack and defense became almost a chess match on a planetary scale, with Eggman as the Grand Master orchestrating each move with precise calculation. The chaos escalated as Eggman pushed deeper into the hive's central zones. Massive industrial furnaces belched smoke and molten metal. Conveyor systems and assembly lines became obstacles and weapons alike, and the defenders used every structural advantage to mount resistance. Eggman's machines, however, turned these challenges into opportunities. Mechanical tendrils redirected molten streams to flood enemy positions. Walking units used machinery as battering tools to breach fortified gates, and drones manipulated structural elements to create improvised pathways for reinforcements. The planet itself seemed to bend to the will of Eggman's intelligence, his robots reshaping its features to maximize the efficiency of their assault and to neutralize the defenders' advantage of terrain. One particularly daring maneuver involved Eggman's heavy artillery units. Using modular transformation capabilities, they deployed atop the highest spires, raining destruction down onto fortified positions and supply hubs. The defenders scrambled to respond, deploying anti-air batteries and attempting to maneuver their troops to safer positions. But the combination of mobility, firepower, and adaptive tactics made the robots nearly unstoppable. Eggman's smaller units exploited the confusion, infiltrating the hive's underbelly, disabling power conduits, and sabotaging weapon systems. It was a coordinated assault on multiple fronts, overwhelming even the most disciplined defenders through sheer technological superiority and strategic ingenuity. Amidst the chaos, Eggman's own command presence became a symbol of the invasion. From his mobile command unit, he monitored every sector simultaneously, issuing commands that were executed instantaneously across the networked army. The integration of AI, sensory data, and tactical analysis allowed for maneuvers that were almost prescient. Enemy movements could be anticipated and countered before they were fully realized. Each successful strike amplified Eggman's confidence, reinforcing the belief that his technological prowess was not just superior, it was transformative. The hive world was no longer merely a target. It was a laboratory for testing the boundaries of mechanized warfare on an unprecedented scale. As Eggman's forces continued their planetary siege, they encountered increasingly desperate resistance. Imperial reinforcements arrived, heavy tanks rumbled through main avenues, and elite infantry attempted to reclaim lost ground. Yet the robots adapted seamlessly, reconfiguring formations, deploying decoys, and utilizing advanced targeting systems to neutralize threats before they could escalate. The combined might of thousands of autonomous units created a relentless wave of pressure, forcing defenders back and systematically dismantling fortifications. The scale and coordination of the assault demonstrated not just brute force, but the superior intelligence of Eggman's designs, capable of handling complexity that would overwhelm even the most experienced human commanders. Every aspect of the planetary siege reinforced the contrast between organic adaptability and mechanical perfection. Eggman's robots could not be distracted by fear, fatigue, or morale. They operated solely on calculated responses, continuously improving as they engaged the defenders. Energy weapons blazed, explosions tore through concrete and steel, and the hive world itself groaned under the weight of relentless, technologically superior invasion. Eggman's mind buzzed with exhilaration, analyzing outcomes, anticipating countermeasures, and adjusting tactics in real time. The siege was more than conquest. It was a demonstration of what could be achieved when intellect and machinery were fused into a single unstoppable force, reshaping an entire world according to the genius of its creator. The invasion of Dr. Eggman's robotic army did not go unnoticed by the major powers of the galaxy, and soon whispers of the threat reached ears that had long stood vigilant over the Imperium and beyond. The first to respond were the Imperium's Adeptus Astartes, the legendary Space Marines, who quickly dispatched reconnaissance units to assess the scale and nature of the incursion. Simultaneously, the Eldar, sensing the disruptive flux in the warp caused by Eggman's machines, dispatched their own sleek, far-seeing craft to observe and, if necessary, intervene. Even the Tau, with their focus on technological supremacy and strategic expansion, mobilized forces to gauge the potential benefit or threat of the enigmatic visitor. Despite centuries of interstellar conflict, all these factions were drawn together by the same necessity. Eggman's robots represented a technological force unlike any they had encountered before, and the only way to stop it was through some form of coordinated effort. The first tentative alliances formed in shadowed corridors and remote void stations. Eldar farseers, their eyes glimpsing possible futures, predicted that the unchecked expansion of Eggman's army could destabilize entire sectors, drawing the attention of both Chaos and Orc warbands. They approached high-ranking Imperial commanders with proposals for cooperation, emphasizing that survival depended on unity, even if temporary and uneasy. The Space Marines, initially distrustful, weighed the wisdom of the Eldar's counsel against their own instincts for honor and victory, ultimately agreeing to coordinate defensive strategies. The Tau, ever pragmatic, saw potential in striking while Eggman's forces were still adapting to the realities of their new universe, and they offered their advanced long-range weaponry to complement the more direct assault capabilities of the other factions. Eggman, as always, remained blissfully unaware of the alliances forming in response to his invasion. His AI systems focused entirely on the tactical realities before them. A continuous march across hostile terrain, engaging hostile forces, neutralizing threats, and analyzing the effectiveness of their weaponry. Yet, as the first coordinated counterattacks began to take shape, the adaptive intelligence of his robots was put to the ultimate test. Skirmishes erupted along multiple fronts, each one a microcosm of the larger strategic ballet being orchestrated by Eggman's adversaries. The combined might of Space Marines, Eldar warriors, and Tau forces introduced levels of coordination and foresight that even his meticulously programmed machines had never encountered. The first major engagement occurred on a cratered industrial world, where Eggman's advance units had already begun to destabilize local defenses. Space Marine squads moved with disciplined precision, bolters firing in controlled bursts, while Eldar jet bikes weaved through the battlefield, disrupting formations with precise strikes. Tau battlesuits provided long-range fire support, targeting critical infrastructure and attempting to cripple the robot's mobility. Eggman's units reacted instantly, recalculating paths, redirecting fire, and deploying defensive measures to neutralize incoming attacks. His adaptive AI proved remarkably effective, repelling the initial assault with minimal losses. Yet, Eggman could sense that this new level of coordination required more than brute force. It demanded ingenuity beyond even his usual tactical brilliance. Recognizing the need for dynamic adaptation, Eggman introduced specialized units designed for rapid response. Small, agile robots infiltrated flanks, disabling supply lines and targeting artillery positions, while massive walkers shifted formation to absorb the concentrated firepower of the Allied forces. The clash became a dance of escalation. Every maneuver by the combined factions prompted a countermaneuver, each side adapting to the other's capabilities in real time. Eggman's analytical mind thrived on this challenge, and he began experimenting with multi-layered strategies that combined deception, overwhelming force, and rapid redeployment. Communication between the Allied forces was critical, and it quickly became clear that trust, even temporary, was a rare commodity. Space Marine sergeants issued orders with precise timing, coordinating with Eldar seers who relayed predictive insights from the warp, while Tau commanders calculated trajectories and probabilities for long-range strikes. Eggman's robots intercepted and analyzed some of these communications, adapting to the coordinated strategies with remarkable speed. In some cases, the combined efforts of the Allies were successful in delaying the advance, forcing Eggman to reconsider his approach and implement contingency measures designed to exploit any fissures in coordination. The battlefields became laboratories for experimentation, each faction testing the limits of their strategies and technologies against the other. Eggman's AI continually processed millions of variables, learning from each encounter and adapting instantly. His robotic army demonstrated an ability to predict enemy patterns, set traps, and exploit weaknesses before they could be fully realized. In turn, the Allied forces adjusted their tactics, creating feints, ambushes, and synchronized strikes designed to overwhelm even the most adaptive machines. The result was an unprecedented level of conflict, a war fought not only with weapons, but with intelligence, foresight, and ingenuity. Tensions occasionally flared between the Allied factions themselves. Space Marines, bound by rigid codes of honor, sometimes chafed at Eldar interventions, which often involved deceptive maneuvers and manipulation of battlefield perception. The Tau, pragmatic to the point of cold calculation, occasionally clashed with the Space Marines' more aggressive tactics, advocating for patient attrition rather than direct confrontation. Eggman, oblivious to the internal friction, exploited these moments subtly, sending his AI to adapt to gaps in coordination, redirecting units to areas of relative weakness, and maximizing the efficiency of his attacks. The planetary sieges demonstrated the necessity and complexity of these alliances. On heavily fortified worlds, Space Marines led the charge against strongpoints, while Eldar skimmers and jump units harassed Eggman's rear lines, and Tau long-range artillery systematically dismantled infrastructure that supported robotic operations. Eggman responded by deploying counter-assault teams designed to neutralize coordinated strikes before they could reach critical targets, while other units created diversions to split attention across multiple fronts. The interplay of adaptation and counter-adaptation created a level of warfare that stretched across entire planets, leaving scorched landscapes and shattered cities in its wake. Despite the challenges, Eggman's ingenuity and the sheer versatility of his machines allowed him to maintain pressure. Adaptive shields and self-repair protocols minimized losses, while modular units shifted roles fluidly, turning reconnaissance drones into combatants and artillery units into mobile assault platforms. The alliances, for all their power and coordination, were forced to continuously innovate, developing tactics specifically designed to counter the ever-evolving threat. Every skirmish became a test of wits as much as of firepower, a dynamic struggle in which the outcome was never certain. In the midst of this uneasy coalition, Eggman's presence and his robotic army had already begun to reshape perceptions. The Allied forces realized that defeating this technological menace required not only brute strength and coordination, but also creativity and adaptability on a scale they had rarely employed before. His machines, though cold and unfeeling, operated with a sophistication that challenged the very principles of interstellar warfare, forcing even the most disciplined and technologically advanced armies to reconsider their assumptions. In this crucible of intergalactic strategy, the temporary alliances that had formed were tested, reformed, and stretched to their limits, as each faction recognized that survival depended on confronting a force that defied every expectation of battle and ingenuity. Eggman's arsenal of iconic robots introduced an entirely new dimension of threat to the Warhammer 40K universe, one that the galaxy had never before encountered. Among his most notable creations was Metal Sonic, a sleek, fast-moving unit designed for both reconnaissance and assassination. Unlike conventional walkers or tanks, Metal Sonic moved with uncanny speed and agility, almost appearing to blur as it traversed the battlefield. Its sensors could anticipate enemy movements before they occurred, and its energy weaponry delivered precise, devastating strikes with near-perfect accuracy. On the battlefields of Warhammer 40K, where armies were accustomed to raw firepower and brute force, this robotic predator introduced an element of unpredictability, striking quickly, disappearing into cover, and re-emerging where least expected. The mere presence of such a machine forced even the most disciplined Space Marine squads to rethink their standard tactical formations. Then there were Eggman's larger mechanized units, such as the Dragoon, a massive quadrupedal walker bristling with artillery, missiles, and rapid-fire energy cannons. Towering over the battlefield, its movements were surprisingly fluid for its size, allowing it to traverse rubble-strewn terrain and crush fortifications with mechanical precision. The Egg Dragoon's primary function was to sow chaos and destruction, and it did so with terrifying efficiency. Every step shook the ground, every salvo left craters in its wake, and its targeting systems could engage multiple threats simultaneously. Infantry units scattered at the sight of it, while larger vehicles were forced to engage at extreme risk, exposing themselves to coordinated fire from Eggman's smaller units. Its combination of mobility, firepower, and autonomous tactical decision-making made it a unique threat, unlike anything the defenders had previously faced. Smaller support robots, often overlooked until they activated, added layers of tactical complexity. Eggman deployed swarms of egg pawns, nimble bipedal units that could overwhelm enemies with sheer numbers, using coordinated attacks to exploit weaknesses in enemy lines. Individually, they were relatively fragile, but collectively, they acted as a living network, capable of cutting off supply lines, distracting heavily armed units, and forcing defenders into unfavorable positions. Eggman's AI systems managed these swarms with remarkable precision, ensuring that every unit contributed to the overarching strategy, turning what seemed like chaos into an orchestrated offensive. These small units, combined with the massive Egg Dragoon and Metal Sonic, created a multi-tiered threat that challenged both infantry and armored divisions simultaneously. One of the most striking aspects of Eggman's robots was their adaptability. Unlike conventional war machines in the Warhammer 40K universe, which relied on rigid designs and pre-programmed strategies, Eggman's creations could reconfigure themselves on the fly. Artillery units transformed into mobile assault platforms when necessary. Scouts could switch between surveillance and combat roles, and even larger walkers could deploy auxiliary weapons to address unexpected threats. This fluidity made them difficult to pin down or predict, frustrating enemy commanders who were accustomed to calculating engagements based on predictable unit behavior. The battlefield became a dynamic, ever-changing arena where Eggman's machines continuously evolved to maintain the upper hand. The integration of AI-driven tactics with specialized robots like the Egg Dragoon and Metal Sonic created synergies that amplified their effectiveness. Metal Sonic would identify high-value targets, relaying coordinates to artillery units or walkers, which then delivered devastating fire with pinpoint accuracy. Swarms of egg pawns disrupted formations and created openings, ensuring that larger units could strike with minimal resistance. Every element of Eggman's mechanized army operated in concert, a single coordinated organism capable of adjusting strategy in real time, learning from enemy tactics, and exploiting weaknesses faster than any conventional human or alien command structure could respond. The psychological impact of these robots on the battlefield was profound. Their appearance alone, unfamiliar and unlike anything encountered in the galaxy, instilled fear and uncertainty. Infantry units hesitated when faced with Metal Sonic's blinding speed, while the ground trembled under the approach of Egg Dragoons, forcing even veteran commanders to reconsider engagement tactics. Observing a coordinated swarm of egg pawns advancing methodically, infantry morale often faltered, as soldiers realized that the assault was not chaotic but purposefully orchestrated. The combination of physical destruction and psychological pressure created an effect far greater than the sum of the machine's individual capabilities. Eggman's robots also introduced a level of technological unpredictability that challenged the very nature of Warhammer 40K warfare. While the galaxy's armies were accustomed to superhuman warriors, titanic war machines, and warp-infused sorcery, Eggman's creations operated on principles unfamiliar to them: rapid adaptation, predictive targeting, and instantaneous reconfiguration. Traditional strategies, relying on brute strength, psychic foresight, or overwhelming numbers, often fell short against machines that could learn from every engagement, anticipate counterattacks, and shift roles seamlessly mid-battle. Every encounter became a puzzle, forcing commanders to innovate on the fly while simultaneously trying to survive the relentless onslaught. Eggman's genius extended beyond the battlefield as well. He equipped his units with sensors capable of scanning not just physical movements, but energy signatures, detecting invisible threats such as warp-based attacks or psychic assaults. Metal Sonic could track a Psyker's presence and evade their powers, while Egg Dragoons could shield critical units from disruptive energy. Even the smallest egg pawns carried microsensors that relayed battlefield data in real time, allowing Eggman to adjust strategies instantly and counter moves that would have required hours of planning in conventional warfare. The integration of intelligence, adaptability, and specialized roles made each unit not just a weapon, but an extension of Eggman's tactical mind, a living network of technological superiority. The clash of Eggman's robots with established Warhammer 40,000 forces produced scenes of devastation and spectacle unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Space Marines and Imperial Guard units, trained for centuries to confront the most terrifying foes, found themselves facing a foe that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outgun them simultaneously. Chaos demons, sensing unfamiliar intelligence and precision, were equally cautious in their assaults. Every robot, from the nimble scouts to the titanic egg dragoons, forced opponents to adapt in ways they had never considered, creating a battlefield in which conventional expectations of war were constantly subverted. In essence, Eggman's robots were not just instruments of war, they were embodiments of his strategic genius, bringing an unprecedented blend of adaptability, firepower, and psychological impact to the conflict. Each specialized unit, whether designed for speed, destruction, or coordination, contributed to a force multiplier that challenged the very fabric of the galaxy's understanding of combat. The defenders, no matter how experienced or powerful, were forced to contend with a level of technological innovation and battlefield synergy that blurred the line between machine and strategist, making every encounter an unpredictable test of survival, cunning, and ingenuity. The arrival of Dr. Eggman and his robotic army did not merely introduce a new combatant into the galaxy. It fundamentally altered the balance of power across multiple war zones. Word of his incursion spread rapidly, reaching the ears of both loyalist and traitor factions, each of whom realized that this mechanical interloper was unlike any threat they had faced before. Entire sectors, previously embroiled in conventional warfare, now had to redirect resources to counter an enemy that was not bound by the weaknesses of flesh or fatigue. Eggman's forces operated with perfect coordination, adaptive intelligence, and unrelenting efficiency, qualities that allowed them to overwhelm even the most experienced commanders. As they advanced into contested territories, the combined armies of the Imperium, Chaos, Orcs, and even Xenos species were forced to respond with unprecedented collaboration and improvisation. The first major confrontation took place on a ravaged battlefield, littered with the remnants of previous conflicts. Smoke rose from shattered fortifications, and the ground was scorched by countless prior engagements. Eggman's robots moved as a single cohesive entity, a calculated tide of metal, energy, and relentless intelligence. Scouts advanced first, mapping terrain, identifying enemy positions, and reporting back in real time. Their data fed into command units that recalibrated movement and attack patterns instantaneously. The Space Marines' disciplined formations were initially effective, bolters and plasma guns tearing into swarms of egg pawns. Yet for every unit destroyed, another appeared in a different location, exploiting the chaos and adapting to the defenders' strategies. The defenders realized quickly that conventional tactics were insufficient. Chaos forces, ever unpredictable, introduced warp-fueled demonic units to confront the mechanical intruders. These entities moved with otherworldly fluidity, their forms shifting and distorting with each strike. Their attacks defied conventional physics, warping reality around Eggman's machines, attempting to disrupt targeting systems and destroy circuitry. Yet Eggman's AI proved remarkably resilient. Sensors adjusted dynamically to account for distortions. Predictive algorithms compensated for non-linear movements, and energy shields absorbed unpredictable bursts of warp energy. While demonic forces inflicted casualties, the robot's capacity for adaptation meant that these attacks, while dangerous, could be systematically countered, turning what should have been an advantage for chaos into a manageable variable. Eggman himself remained in the mobile command unit, observing, analyzing, and optimizing. He was not merely content with destruction. He was fascinated by the interaction between his machines and these new, unfamiliar enemies. Each engagement provided insight into tactics, weaknesses, and environmental conditions. Heavy walkers like the Dragoon plowed through frontal assaults, while smaller drones infiltrated flanks, exploiting gaps created by the enemy's focus on larger threats. Metal sonic units darted among battlefield debris, neutralizing high-value targets with surgical precision, their movements so rapid that even the most battle-hardened Space Marines struggled to track them. Eggman's army was not simply attacking, it was learning, evolving, and testing the limits of the galaxy's defenses in real time. The combined forces of the Imperium and allied factions struggled to maintain cohesion. Orc warbands, driven by sheer brutality, charged recklessly, creating opportunities for Eggman's smaller units to flank and disrupt supply lines. Imperial Guard regiments attempted to form defensive perimeters, only to find their positions systematically dismantled by automated precision fire from Egg Dragoons and artillery drones. Even elite Space Marine units, accustomed to confronting the deadliest foes, were forced to adapt continually, shifting formations, coordinating with unexpected allies, and relying on intuition as much as strategy to survive. Eggman's robots, however, had the advantage of instantaneous calculation and multi-layered response, transforming the battlefield into a constantly shifting puzzle where the defenders were always reacting, never initiating. The siege of fortified positions became a showcase of Eggman's ingenuity. Automated turrets were suppressed or neutralized by long-range precision fire, while artillery units used high explosive rounds to breach walls and create choke points that allowed swarms of smaller robots to infiltrate. Defensive squads attempting counterattacks were intercepted mid-maneuver by the adaptive AI, which redirected resources dynamically to prevent breakthroughs. Eggman's army was able to exploit every structural weakness, every lapse in coordination, and every predictable pattern of the defenders, turning even well-fortified strongholds into temporary obstacles rather than permanent barriers. One of the most challenging aspects for the defenders was the unpredictability of Eggman's adaptive strategies. No two engagements were the same. Every time a particular tactic seemed to succeed, the AI recalibrated to counter it in subsequent encounters. This forced the Imperium and allied forces to innovate on the fly, improvising with strategies that combined brute strength, psychic insight, and coordinated precision strikes. Yet despite their efforts, the robots' capacity for learning and instantaneous adaptation often rendered these innovations insufficient. Every setback for Eggman was a data point, every loss a lesson that allowed his army to perform better in the next engagement. The psychological effect on the galaxy's defenders was immense. Troops witnessing metal sonic units darting through hailstorms of bolter fire, egg dragoons crushing fortified barricades, and swarms of egg pawns infiltrating rear lines began to doubt the effectiveness of traditional warfare. Commanders realized that victory against Eggman's forces required more than valor or firepower. It demanded innovation, flexibility, and the capacity to anticipate adaptive tactics, qualities that even the most disciplined regiments struggled to maintain under constant pressure. Morale fluctuated with every encounter, as soldiers witnessed how machines, devoid of fear or fatigue, could execute strategies with mechanical perfection. The larger strategic implications became apparent as Eggman's advance continued. Entire planets that were previously contested became theaters of technological warfare, with conventional armies struggling to resist the relentless onslaught. The coordinated use of multiple robot types, each specialized for different roles, created layered threats that no single force could neutralize alone. The galaxy, already a place of endless conflict, was being forced to confront a new paradigm, warfare driven not by organic determination or supernatural power, but by cold, adaptive, technological genius that could evolve in real time. Eggman's presence also began to destabilize alliances, both temporary and long-standing. Factions accustomed to conflict with each other now found themselves needing to cooperate against a common technological enemy. Even brief coordination between Xenos and Imperial forces, while tense and fraught with mistrust, became necessary to prevent complete domination by the mechanized invader. Yet every act of cooperation was constantly tested by Eggman's adaptive strategies, which exploited gaps in communication, hesitation, and even human error. His army forced the galaxy's inhabitants to engage in conflict on a level they had never before experienced, one that combined speed, intelligence, and relentless efficiency in a way that reshaped the very understanding of war. In the end, the clash between Eggman's robots and the combined forces of the galaxy became a relentless cycle of adaptation, counterattack, and evolution. Each engagement revealed new strategies, new weaknesses, and new opportunities as Eggman's machines learned and improved, while the defenders were forced to innovate under pressure. The battlefield became a proving ground for ingenuity and resilience, a theater in which traditional notions of warfare were constantly challenged by the precision, adaptability, and intelligence of a single mind controlling a vast, unstoppable army of machines. The landscape of battle had shifted entirely with the arrival of Dr. Eggman and his mechanized forces. No longer was the war confined to familiar theaters of conflict. Entire worlds trembled under the advance of these unfamiliar machines. Their presence disrupted not only local defenses, but also the broader balance of power, forcing armies to respond to a threat that was simultaneously overwhelming in firepower and unpredictable in tactics. Among the most effective of Eggman's units were his flying drones, which provided both reconnaissance and rapid response capabilities. These aerial units darted over the battlefield with blinding speed, scanning terrain, detecting enemy positions, and coordinating strikes with lethal precision. They moved as extensions of Eggman's mind, capable of identifying weak points in enemy formations and relaying real-time data to artillery units and heavy walkers on the ground. The defenders found themselves constantly reacting, unable to predict where the next assault would come from, which created a psychological strain as debilitating as any physical threat. Eggman's use of terrain was another defining factor in the success of his army. Battlefields in the Warhammer 40K universe were rarely flat or predictable. Ruined cities, industrial complexes, and cratered wastelands created natural choke points and defensive positions. Eggman's AI processed these environments in an instant, identifying avenues of approach, ambush points, and areas where enemy units could be neutralized efficiently. Walkers like the Dragoon adapted their gait and weapon orientation to navigate rubble-strewn streets, crushing barricades or using debris as improvised cover while maintaining offensive pressure. Smaller units, such as the Egg Pawns, infiltrated narrow alleyways, bypassing fortifications entirely and striking at critical supply nodes. Even structures previously thought to be secure were vulnerable, as Eggman's army could repurpose the environment itself as a weapon. Redirecting molten in the introduction of Metal Sonic onto these battlefields added a level of chaos that was difficult to contain. Its speed was unmatched, darting across the terrain in ways that defied conventional tracking, striking at high-value targets before disappearing into cover. Infantry units found it almost impossible to respond effectively, and even heavily armored Space Marine squads struggled to predict its movements. Metal Sonic's adaptability made it more than a weapon. It was a reconnaissance and strike unit capable of shaping entire engagements. Its ability to anticipate enemy maneuvers forced commanders to constantly adjust strategies, often splitting their forces or creating layered defenses in attempts to mitigate its impact, which played directly into Eggman's strategy of overwhelming the enemy through calculated pressure on multiple fronts. One of the most striking aspects of Eggman's approach was the integration of his robotic forces into a cohesive network of battlefield intelligence. Swarms of egg pawns moved in synchrony, each unit acting independently yet contributing to the overall strategy, creating patterns that were both unpredictable and precise. Artillery units adjusted targeting in real time based on the movement of enemy forces, while larger walkers deployed suppressive fire to control territory and create openings for smaller, more agile units. This level of coordination was unprecedented. No army in the galaxy had encountered an opponent capable of such instantaneous, multi-layered adaptation. Every skirmish became a complex interaction of prediction, reaction, and counteraction, where each side attempted to outthink the other while under the constant pressure of physical assault. Chaos forces in particular presented a unique challenge, as warp-touched daemons exploited distortions in reality and engaged in attacks that were inherently unpredictable. Tentacles, claws, and warp energy lashed out at Eggman's machines, attempting to bypass their predictive targeting and exploit vulnerabilities. The AI, however, quickly adapted to these anomalies, analyzing patterns and adjusting responses mid-engagement. Energy shields reconfigured in milliseconds to absorb bursts of warp energy, and predictive algorithms recalculated trajectories for every incoming threat. Even when daemons shifted form mid-strike, Eggman's army responded with precision, neutralizing attacks and maintaining offensive momentum. This ability to counter chaos itself demonstrated the sheer adaptability and intelligence embedded in Eggman's designs, highlighting a technological supremacy that was as frightening as it was effective. Eggman's tactical genius extended beyond simple battlefield management. He anticipated supply chain disruptions, enemy reinforcements, and environmental hazards with near-perfect accuracy. Modular units were deployed not only for combat, but for logistical support, repairing damaged machines, redirecting power to critical systems, and maintaining continuous operational effectiveness. Smaller units infiltrated enemy lines to sabotage weapon emplacements, relay false signals, or distract high-value targets, allowing heavier units to exploit openings and crush resistance. The interplay between deception, precision, and overwhelming force created a psychological warfare component that affected morale as much as physical losses, further destabilizing even the most disciplined regiments. As the battle progressed, the scale of destruction became almost cinematic in its scope. Entire city blocks were leveled by the combined firepower of Egg Dragoons, artillery units, and directed energy strikes. Smoke and dust choked the streets, punctuated by sparks from shattered machinery and the twisted remains of combatants. Metal sonic units leapt across debris, eliminating high-priority targets with surgical precision, while egg pawns swarmed through breaches, ensuring no position remained uncontested. Observers, whether Imperial, Xenos, or Chaos-aligned, could scarcely comprehend the coordination required for such sustained, multi-front assaults, and morale among defenders plummeted as every attempt to regain the initiative was anticipated and countered almost immediately. The battlefields also showcased Eggman's ingenuity in adapting to environmental hazards. Lava flows, collapsing infrastructure, and volatile industrial machinery were not obstacles, but tools. Walkers redirected molten streams to cut off enemy retreat. Drones manipulated structures to create impromptu cover or trap enemy units, and artillery precision strikes ensured that the terrain itself became a weapon. Even heavily fortified positions were vulnerable to these dynamic manipulations, forcing defenders to constantly reassess their assumptions and adapt to a war being fought not only by force, but by ingenuity. Throughout these engagements, Eggman remained the unseen architect, his mind linked to every unit through the AI network. He observed the battlefield as a whole, calculated outcomes of engagements before they occurred, and adjusted tactics instantaneously to exploit weaknesses. No single failure mattered for long, as the machines learned, adapted, and evolved with each encounter. The defenders faced not only physical destruction, but a constantly evolving challenge that pushed the boundaries of strategy, coordination, and tactical ingenuity to their limits. The sheer scale, adaptability, and integration of Eggman's robotic army created an unprecedented theater of war. Every engagement was a masterclass in multi-layered tactics, combining brute force, precision strikes, reconnaissance, and psychological pressure. The galaxy had faced titanic war machines, superhuman soldiers, and even demonic incursions, but never an opponent that could think, adapt, and execute with such relentless efficiency. Eggman's army reshaped battlefields, challenged every assumption of warfare, and forced the galaxy's defenders to confront the terrifying reality of an enemy whose genius lay not only in firepower, but in its ability to evolve faster than any force could anticipate. Eggman's ultimate strategy in the Warhammer 40K universe went beyond mere conquest. It was a meticulous orchestration of domination that leveraged every asset of his mechanized arsenal while exploiting the fractured nature of the galaxy itself. At the heart of this strategy was the integration of intelligence, mobility, and sheer destructive capability across all scales of his army. The initial skirmishes had demonstrated the overwhelming adaptability of his machines, and Eggman's mind now focused on expanding that advantage to achieve control over key strategic points: hive cities, industrial worlds, and orbital strongholds. Each target was selected not only for its tactical value, but for the ripple effect its capture would have across multiple sectors, disrupting supply lines, communications, and morale among Imperial, Xenos, and Chaos forces alike. The sheer audacity of this plan, operating simultaneously across countless worlds, underscored Eggman's genius in viewing war as a multi-dimensional puzzle, one that his robotic army could solve with precision and efficiency. The first phase involved the rapid seizure of communication and control centers. Eggman deployed swarms of egg pawns, small but highly coordinated units, to infiltrate command complexes and relay real-time data back to his central AI. These units moved with surgical precision, bypassing security measures, disabling automated defenses, and neutralizing key personnel before reinforcements could respond. Meanwhile, larger walkers such as the Dragoon provided overwatch, crushing fortified positions and suppressing enemy advances. The combination of infiltration, rapid strikes, and overwhelming firepower ensured that these strategic points fell with minimal delay, setting the stage for subsequent phases of his plan. Eggman's focus on maintaining operational continuity across all units allowed him to coordinate assaults simultaneously on multiple fronts, creating a tempo of war that kept defenders constantly off balance. Metal Sonic became a key asset in Eggman's strategy of disruption. Its speed and predictive targeting made it perfect for intercepting communications, neutralizing elite operatives, and striking at high-value targets before they could influence the battle. In the dense underhives of captured cities, it darted through narrow corridors, eliminating snipers and sabotaging artillery emplacements, ensuring that defenders could not regroup. Its agility and precision created a psychological effect as well, instilling fear among troops who were unable to predict its movements or respond effectively to its strikes. The presence of Metal Sonic forced defenders to divert resources and attention, creating openings for larger assault units and giving Eggman's forces the initiative in nearly every engagement. Eggman's mastery of battlefield adaptation extended to both terrain and enemy behavior. In industrial zones, Automated assembly lines and factory machinery were repurposed to assist in assaults, creating environmental hazards for enemy troops while providing cover and strategic advantage for Eggman's units. Walkers and drones coordinated to manipulate structures, collapse walls, or redirect molten streams to channel enemy forces into kill zones. This dynamic use of the environment not only maximized efficiency, but also transformed each battlefield into a lethal extension of Eggman's tactical mind. Enemy commanders found themselves contending not only with robotic precision, but with an opponent capable of turning terrain itself into a weapon. Psychological warfare was another integral aspect of Eggman's campaign. The sheer scale and coordination of his army, combined with the unprecedented adaptability of his units, exerted a continuous mental pressure on defenders. Swarms of egg pawns advancing in synchronized patterns, metal sonic appearing and disappearing unpredictably, and egg dragoons leveling fortifications with terrifying ease created a sense of inevitability among those opposing him. Even veteran Space Marines and Imperial Guard regiments, trained to face horrors both mortal and demonic, were forced to question their assumptions and constantly adapt to survive. Morale often faltered in the face of an enemy that could anticipate tactics, counter strategies, and maintain relentless pressure without fatigue or hesitation. The integration of different robotic types into a cohesive network amplified Eggman's advantage. Reconnaissance units identified threats and opportunities, feeding data to command walkers and artillery units that delivered precise strikes to exploit vulnerabilities. Smaller swarms disrupted formations and diverted attention, while larger machines delivered decisive firepower exactly where it would have the greatest effect. Each unit, whether small or massive, was designed not merely to fight, but to complement the capabilities of every other unit on the field. The result was a symphony of mechanized warfare, where strategy, firepower, and intelligence converged to overwhelm even the most disciplined defenses. Eggman's foresight extended beyond immediate tactical victories to the long-term destabilization of entire regions. By capturing key industrial worlds, he disrupted the production and resupply capabilities of the Imperium and its allies. Communication hubs fell under his control, impeding coordination between scattered forces and creating gaps in situational awareness. Propaganda, executed through controlled media or captured networks, undermined morale and fostered confusion, turning previously coordinated armies into fractured groups vulnerable to concentrated assaults. Every action was calculated to maximize both immediate and systemic effects, reflecting a level of strategic thinking that combined the precision of engineering with the unpredictability of human and alien behavior. The adaptability of Eggman's AI allowed for continuous evolution during the campaign. Losses, environmental hazards, and unexpected enemy tactics were all treated as data points for instantaneous recalibration. Artillery units could adjust trajectories mid-barrage. Walkers could reroute paths around new obstacles, and smaller units could change formations to exploit newly discovered weaknesses. This continuous feedback loop ensured that Eggman's forces not only survived, but thrived under conditions that would have crippled traditional armies. Engagements became exercises in learning as much as destruction, with each encounter refining strategies and increasing efficiency across the entire mechanized network. Eggman's ultimate objective extended beyond mere conquest. It was the creation of a self-sustaining, adaptable empire of machines capable of independent operation. Each captured world became a node in his larger network, providing resources, data, and strategic advantage. Autonomous units could patrol, defend, and expand Eggman's influence without direct oversight, while AI algorithms continuously optimized production, deployment, and engagement strategies. This vision of a galactic network of mechanized dominance transformed the very concept of war, demonstrating that technological intelligence and adaptive coordination could rival even the most devoutly trained human, Xenos, or daemonic forces. The broader implications of Eggman's campaign were profound. Entire sectors faced the unprecedented challenge of contending with an enemy that could learn, adapt, and execute with near-perfect precision, forcing alliances, improvisation, and innovation on a scale previously unseen. Conventional notions of victory and strategy were constantly challenged, as no force could rely solely on numbers, firepower, or psychic prowess. Eggman's robotic army represented a new paradigm, where intelligence, adaptability, and coordination converged to create a threat that transcended traditional limits, reshaping the galaxy's understanding of war and forcing all who opposed him to confront a future defined by the cold, relentless brilliance of a single mechanical genius.